The morning I found the death threat on my car, I actually laughed. I was 23, half asleep, running late for a doctor's appointment. I peeled the note off the windshield wiper and read it. "I'm going to kill you, you disgusting piece of filth," and my first thought was, Dad must have yelled at the neighborhood kids again. That was how normal my life was. That was how safe I felt. That feeling would not last much longer. My name is Maya, and this isn't just my story, it's my family's story. And the scariest part? We knew exactly who was doing this to us the entire time, we just couldn't prove it. Let me back up. Winter 2012. I was living with my dad, Rick, in our quiet suburban house. My mom, Karen, and my younger brother lived about 10 minutes away. We were just a normal, boring family. Dad had a habit of lecturing neighborhood parents whenever their kids acted up. There were these twin boys on the block who liked to trap squirrels. Dad had dragged them home by their ears more than once. When I showed him the note, he shrugged. I shrugged. We moved on. But then I called my mom. The moment I mentioned the note, casually, almost as a joke, her whole tone shifted. She stopped laughing, and she told me, very quietly and very seriously, to lock every window and every door in the house, to bring a weapon to bed with me, a knife, a bat, something. She said it at least a dozen times before the call ended. I thought she was being dramatic. Moms do that. I didn't listen. Then the deliveries started showing up at Mom's house. Boxes of religious books, pizza after pizza, even a moving truck that pulled up and sat in her driveway for 2 hours before leaving confused, newspapers, adult magazines, random packages addressed to no one. It felt like a prank, a weird, annoying prank. We assumed it was some local idiot with too much time on his hands. We apologized to the delivery drivers and tried to forget about it. Then, in November, everything changed. I'd been taking a night school class with my best friend. We got out at 10. His mom would drop me off, and I'd usually wind down on the couch for an hour or two before bed. That night, I fell asleep there. Something jolted me awake at 4 a.m. A sound. Deliberate. Sharp. Unmistakable. Someone was slashing our tires. Now, I will be the first to admit this was not a smart decision. I'm 5'5". It was pitch dark, and the smartest thing I could have done was lock the door and call 911. Instead, I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife I could find and walked outside. There was a man crouched beside our car in the driveway. I could see him clearly under the streetlight. And I did the second dumbest thing I've ever done in my life. I yelled, "Hey!" He turned around. That's when I saw his knife. Not a pocket knife. Not a box cutter. An enormous hunting knife, at least 6 inches long, still gleaming from what he'd just done to our tires. He looked surprised for exactly 1 second. Then something shifted in his face, and he started walking toward me. Fast. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. My legs just stopped working. And then, a porch light flicked on across the street. My neighbor, thank God, had heard the noise too. He threw open his window and shouted that he was calling the police. The man shouted back that he didn't care, but he retreated anyway. He walked back to a car I hadn't noticed sitting at the curb, and in the passenger seat was a woman, middle-aged, long dark hair. She was watching me. Our eyes locked. I knew her. I could feel it. That gut-deep certainty that you've seen someone before. But I couldn't place her. I couldn't pull her name or her face from anywhere in my memory. She just stared at me with this expression I can only describe as cold and completely unafraid. Then they drove away. The police came. They took a report. They told us there was nothing they could do without knowing who did it. I called my mom. And this time, I wasn't calling to update her casually. I told her what happened in full. The man, the knife, the woman in the car. There was a long silence on the other end. She said she didn't know who it was, but I could hear it in her voice. She was lying. A few weeks later, I drove to her house. I wasn't asking anymore. I needed answers. The second she saw me walk through the door, she burst into tears. She sat me down and told me everything. A few months earlier, her weed dealer had introduced her to his girlfriend, a woman named Serena. Serena had reached out through him because she was interested in buying some of the natural makeup my mom sold on the side. They met up, started chatting, and at some point my mom mentioned her last name. Serena stopped cold. She asked if my mom had ever been married to a man named Rick. When my mom said yes, Serena started sobbing. And then she told my mom a story about something that had allegedly happened to her as a teenager. Something horrific, involving Rick and 2 men he used to live with. She said they had abused her and exploited her for years. She said she'd never recovered. She said it had destroyed her life. My mom didn't know what to believe. She knew my father to be quiet, gentle, the kind of man who never raised his voice, but she also couldn't understand why someone would lie about something like that. She consoled Serena, some for hours. Serena finally left. 2 days later, Mom came home from work to find Serena's boyfriend sitting inside her apartment. He hadn't broken in through the window, he had a key. To this day, we don't know how. He told her very calmly that he was going to kill my father, that my father deserved it, and that if my mother told a single person, especially the police, he would make sure something far worse happened to me. He described the layout of our living room. He described what I was wearing that day. That's when my mother understood that they had been watching us. For weeks, the calls started the next morning, every day, multiple times a day. Sometimes from Serena, sometimes from him, threats, taunts, promises of what they would do to my father, what they would do to me. My mom stopped eating, lost 30 pounds. Her hair started falling out. She had panic attacks so severe she stopped going to work. She didn't tell anyone because she believed them. She only called the police after the night I almost got stabbed. She couldn't let them hurt me, and what the police told her. They knew Serena immediately. Immediately. She was well known to them, not as a victim, but as a predator. She had done this exact thing to at least a dozen other men. She'd find them, construct a story, threaten them with false accusations, and extort them for money, electronics, drugs. When she got arrested on drug charges, which was often, she'd try to bargain her way to a shorter sentence by handing over the names of the men she'd targeted. She'd done it so many times the police had stopped believing her entirely. After my mom made that call, the threats stopped. Serena and her boyfriend disappeared from our lives as suddenly as they had entered them. But here's the thing. We never found out how she got into my mom's apartment. We never found out how long she'd been inside our house before my mom knew. We never found out who else she might have been watching. And sometimes, late at night, when I notice a car parked just a little too long on our street, I still think about that woman's face, staring at me, completely unafraid. Let me tell you something about Wyoming roads. They don't end. They just keep going, mile after mile of cracked asphalt cutting through nothing. No exits, no shortcuts, no witnesses. Just you, your car, and whoever else happens to be out there. I was 9 years old the summer my mom decided to pile my little sister Daisy and me into her beat-up sedan for a road trip across the state. We had family scattered all over Wyoming, and my mom was the kind of woman who thought a 6-hour drive was no big deal. So off we went, snacks on the seat, radio crackling, windows cracked just enough to smell the sage. I want to describe my mom to you, because it matters. She was tiny, maybe 5 feet tall on a good day, maybe 100 pounds soaking wet. Every single one of my childhood friends was a little scared of her. Not because she was mean, she wasn't. It was something in her eyes, a quiet stillness that told you, without a word, that she was not a woman to be trifled with. That stillness is what saved our lives. We'd been on the road for a few hours when I first noticed the truck, green and white, old, the kind of vehicle that looked like it had been running on stubbornness and rust for the past 2 decades. It had been ahead of us for a while. Not unusual on those empty roads. You see the same 2 or 3 vehicles for miles out there. You kind of get used to them. Daisy was bouncing in her seat, begging my mom to stop at the gas station we were approaching. She had her heart set on those little wax bottles filled with sugary juice. You know the ones. Tiny, colorful, and tasted like liquid candy. Mom smiled and said yes. The green and white truck pulled in ahead of us. We parked, used the restroom, grabbed our snacks. Daisy got her wax bottles. I got chips. Mom filled the tank. Completely normal, completely forgettable. We got back on the road. And maybe 10 minutes later, my mom said something that made my stomach drop. That truck behind us? Is that the same one from the gas station? I turned around in my seat and looked through the rear window. Green and white. Rusted bumper. Same dent on the left side. Yeah, I said. That's it. I turned back around and kept eating my chips. But I noticed my mom had stopped humming along to the radio. She didn't say anything for a while. She didn't have to. I could feel it. That shift in the air when a calm person stops being calm on the inside even though nothing changes on the outside. She kept checking the rearview mirror, again and again. Then the truck started getting closer. Not in a normal passing you kind of way. It would surge forward, close enough that I could see the driver's face if I looked back, and then drop back again. Then surge forward, then back, like a cat playing with something before it decides to use its claws. We were miles from the next gas station, miles from anything. My mom adjusted the rearview mirror slowly, and then she spoke to us in a voice I had never heard from her before, even and quiet, like she was asking us what we wanted for dinner. Listen to me carefully, she said. When I pull into the next gas station, I'm going to open my door like I'm getting out. I need you both to keep your doors closed. Don't move. Don't get out. Just sit still and act normal, okay? Daisy and I exchanged a look. I remember the wax bottle going still in her hand. Okay, Mom, we said. The gas station appeared ahead like a lifeline. Mom pulled up to a pump. The green and white truck followed us in and parked just off to the side, not at a pump, just to the side, watching. Mom left the engine running. She pushed her door open slowly, like she was about to step out. The driver's door of the truck swung open. A man climbed out. Big. The kind of big that an adult would notice, not just a 9-year-old. He walked around to the front of his truck, propped the hood open, and bent over the engine with his back to us. Just doing some car trouble, nothing to see here. My mom slammed her door. The tires screamed against the pavement. I spun around in my seat and watched through the back window as the man snapped upright, like a puppet yanked by a string. He turned and stared directly at our car. Then, in one quick motion, he slammed his hood shut. He hadn't been under that hood for more than 10 seconds. My mom drove like I had never seen her drive before. The speedometer climbed and climbed. I held onto the door handle without thinking about it. Daisy had gone completely silent beside me, her wax bottle clutched in both hands. The road ahead bent sharply to the left. But just before the curve, there was a small road branching off to the right. A few buildings, a gravel lot, an afterthought of a side street. My mom hit the brakes so hard I lurched forward against my seatbelt. She yanked the wheel. The car actually slid, around that corner, tires spitting gravel, and she floored it through the parking lot of one of the buildings. She pulled around to the back and killed the headlights. We sat there in the dark, hidden. You could see the road from where we were parked. Just a thin strip of it, but enough. Nobody spoke. Nobody breathed. And then, maybe 2 minutes later, the green and white truck flew past. Fast, too fast. It disappeared around the left bend in the road without slowing down, without stopping, like it was looking for something it had already lost. We sat behind that building for a long time. Finally, Daisy asked in a small voice if she could use the bathroom. Mom laughed. This short, sharp sound that wasn't quite a laugh. She said she needed to go too, but we'd wait a little longer and then drive to the next station. And then she said something I have never forgotten. The kind of thing that only makes sense when you've just outrun something you don't have a name for, she said. I would rather wet myself in this car than let someone hurt you girls on the side of a Wyoming road. We got back on the highway when it felt safe. We drove to the next town. We used the bathroom. We got back on the road. We never saw the green and white truck again. But here's the thing that still keeps me up sometimes. Decades later, we don't know what that man wanted. Maybe he was just a bad driver with an overheating engine and terrible timing. Maybe it was all coincidence. The gas station, the tailgating, the hood slamming shut the second we left. Maybe. But my mom knew. She knew the way animals know, wordlessly in the body, before the brain catches up. And she acted on it without panic, without hesitation, without ever letting us see how scared she really was. I think about that a lot. I think about what happens to the families where nobody notices, where nobody thinks to check if it's the same truck, where the driver doesn't slam his hood shut and stand there, watching you go. Because that part, that's what I can't explain away. He wasn't fixing anything, he was waiting. I've lived in the same sleepy farming valley in rural Ontario my entire life. 18 years of the same gravel paths, the same crossroads, the same neighbors who've known you since you were in diapers. When you grow up somewhere that small, you think you know all of its secrets. I was wrong about that. Last Tuesday proved it. I was driving home from my evening class at university. It was just past 10 at night, and I was exhausted. The kind of tired where your eyes feel like sandpaper and your brain is running about 3 seconds behind everything. I always take the back roads home. They're faster, quieter, and I know them by heart. Or at least, I thought I did. I was crawling along one of the crappier gravel stretches, a narrow lane with thin woods on both sides, when something caught my eye up ahead. A faint glinting through the trees. My first thought was a flashlight, a hiker maybe, a dog walker. But as my headlight swept closer, I realized what it actually was. There was a light on inside the old shack. Now, let me tell you about this shack, because it matters. I first saw it when I was around 6 or 7 years old. My dad and a few other parents used to toss our bikes in the back of a pickup and drive us way out onto the back roads and let us explore for hours. That was how a bunch of us stumbled across this rotting little structure sitting maybe 20 meters off the path, half swallowed by the tree line. Even as a little kid, I knew it felt wrong. It had no windows. The door was always shut. One of my friends said her older sister had tried to open it and found it locked tight. We moved on quickly. Kids find more interesting things to fixate on than a creepy old shed. But it became a sort of landmark, a thing I drove past without really seeing anymore. I hadn't thought about it in years. Until that night, when the door was standing wide open, and a warm amber light was spilling out through the frame into the pitch-black woods. In all the years I had driven this road, more than 100 times, I'd estimate I had never once seen that door open, never seen a single sign that anyone had been inside, not a tire track, not a boot print, nothing. My stomach dropped in a way I can't quite explain. It wasn't panic yet. It was something quieter and colder than that, like your body understanding a threat before your brain catches up. I slowed down as I approached, eyes fixed on the glow through the trees, trying to see if anyone was in there, which is probably the only reason I spotted the shape that lunged out of the bushes directly into my path. I slammed the brakes hard. The car skidded and crunched to a stop on the gravel, and standing in the beam of my headlights was a man. He was extremely tall and very thin, the kind of thin that looks wrong, like the proportions are slightly off. Scraggly gray hair, patchy and unwashed. His clothes hung off him like they belonged to someone 3 sizes larger. He looked like he'd been out in those woods for a long, long time. Before I could process any of that, he walked calmly around to my driver's side window and knocked on the glass. I cracked it, maybe 2 centimeters, enough to hear him. "What are you doing out here?" I asked. My voice came out steadier than I felt. He had a thick, slow voice, almost deliberate, like each word was being carefully placed. "My truck is broken down," he said. I looked around. There was no truck. Not on the road ahead, not behind me, not on the shoulder. I turned back to him and said, "I don't see it." He paused. "It's just up the road." He pointed vaguely into the dark. "I'll show you. Come with me." "Come with me." Something in my chest went very still. I'm 18. I'm a girl. I'm not particularly big. I know nothing about fixing cars. Why on earth would this man ask me, specifically, to come and help him with a broken vehicle, in the dark, on a road where nobody goes? But I was tired, and some stubborn little part of me still felt guilty, the way you do when you think someone might genuinely need help. So I said okay and reached for my gear stick to drive slowly up ahead. He immediately shook his head. "Just walk, it's not far." I stared at him. "I'd rather drive to it." His expression shifted. Something tightened in his face. "Your car won't fit," he said. "It's in the trees." And that's when the pieces started sliding into place, one by one, cold and horrible. He'd said the truck was up the road. Now it was in the trees. I had been thinking, just moments ago, that the tree line was too dense for any vehicle to fit through. And even if it had somehow veered off the road, what did he expect me to do? Push it out? There was nothing I could do for him. There was no reason for me to be there at all, unless that wasn't why he wanted me out of my car. "Then how did your truck get into the trees?" I asked carefully. He didn't answer, just stared at me. The silence stretched out long enough that I asked again. Still nothing. And when he finally spoke, he leaned down slightly and looked directly into my eyes through the cracked window. "You don't look old enough to drive," he said. No smile, no warmth. A completely flat, cold expression. My heart was hammering now. People say that to me sometimes. I'm small, I look young, but they always laugh when they say it. They say it the way you say something harmless. He said it the way you say something else entirely. Like a statement of intent, like he was making a note. I grabbed my phone, babbling something about calling someone to help him, and I became very aware, suddenly horribly aware, that I hadn't thought about the shack in several minutes. I looked up the road. The light was still on. The door was still open. And there was nobody else out there. He had come from that shack. He had turned that light on, and he had been waiting. I think he saw the understanding cross my face, because without another word, his expression cracked, fury, pure and sudden, and he drove his fist into my window with enough force to shutter the entire car. I screamed. I threw the gear stick forward and floored it. In my rearview mirror, I watched his silhouette standing in the road getting smaller. Then he turned and walked back toward the shack, back toward that light, unhurried, like someone who had nowhere better to be. I didn't stop driving until I was inside my own house with every lock turned. My mom called around to everyone she knew. Nobody recognized the description. Nobody knew who owned that shack. A family friend said he was nearly certain it had been abandoned for at least 4 years. 4 years. And someone had been using it. I take a different road home now. I haven't been back. But some nights, when I'm driving home in the dark, I think about that light in the trees. about how long it might have been on before I ever noticed, and how many other cars drove straight past without slowing down.